What's up, y'all? Welcome to Eagle Talk. We are here with a really good friend of ours, Mr. Ed Dixon.
What up?
What's up, homeboy?
Hey, how you guys doing?
We got my bride here. She's in a good mood. She's smiling.
Look at me. I'm like all in the middle with the men's folks. Look, I'm with the men.
She tried to get us to do this alone, but I want to bring her in just for different perspective.
Yeah.
But this is a really good friend of mine. He's actually my financial advisor. I tried to get him on here 2 times before, and he had prior engagement, so I'm really excited to have him today.
Yes.
And Ed, tell him a little bit about yourself.
So Ed Dixon, originally from the Midwest, like you guys, from the Detroit area.
You got some Cartiers?
I actually had some Cartiers.
I got some Cartiers.
I feel like everybody in Detroit
I was
with
worried they was
Cartier.
gonna get snatched, so I gave them away. But yeah, we moved here to Texas in 2009, and so we've been here since then. I've been a financial advisor with Edward Jones since 2012. Yeah, just met you guys obviously through the church and developed a friendship, and it's been a good relationship with you guys, not just professionally but personally, being a part of our marriage. That's a whole nother podcast. My wife will probably have you guys on eventually, but helping us grow in our marriage and everything like that.
No, I love that. So speaking of Ed's wife, Brittany, so here's a funny story about Brittany. Brittany and I became really good. I feel like Brittany and I probably met before. Is that what you're talking about? Listen, that's what I was gonna say. Brittany and I met before all of these guys met each other. And the way we met was like, we were at church and I was speaking to our pastor's wife after she did Bible study. And I'm like, I'm all deep, like crying, like, okay, in Bible study. And she looked at me, she was like, you look just like my assistant, Brittany. And Brittany comes over, and sure, me and Brittany both kind of look at each other. Like, I mean, we could be cousins, right, but I don't think we could be like twins.
Y'all definitely favorites.
But the crazy thing is, like, we have been in church. Do you remember this, Eddie? One Sunday, because you were serving, I was serving. And I peeked my head into where you were serving. And I was like, hey, 3D, that's what your wife called you. Yep. And this other guy, he was working with you. And he like stopped what he was doing. He was like, ooh, that's rude. No hi, baby. No good morning. No nothing. And I was like, that would be highly inappropriate. Right. He literally thought I was Brittany.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah. And we've had a few of those instances. So not sure why. Do you think me and Brittany look alike?
I think y'all, like you said, could be cousins and favor each other.
But not where people would literally stop. They would be talking to me or Brittany thinking we were the other. I don't see it like that. We're going to have to throw a picture up on a podcast and y'all vote. I feel like we could be cousins for sure.
Yep. Yeah, well, we actually brought Ed in here because we're talking about the biggest lessons in working for yourself. And we were just talking before we started recording about he works with Edward Jones, but it's still pretty much your business, right?
Right.
You want to elaborate on that a little bit? I don't really know how it goes. I know you say they train you in the beginning, but how does it go?
And how did you get into financial services?
So, I mean, I've always been enamored with finances. Obviously, growing up in the Detroit area wasn't really top of conversation as far as growing up in my family. So it's just something that I studied on my own and wanted to make sure as my life progressed that I was taking care of myself and taking care of my family. And actually, it was a funny story how I got into Edward Jones. I was in another position and I wasn't actively looking for anything, but my mother-in-law, who again, talking about business owner and starting under the umbrella of another company, has been with Mary Kay for 30, 40 years. As long as I know my wife. Right. Yeah. And she's been driving a pink Cadillac. My wife actually learned how to drive with one of them big pink DeVille's. Right. And so she actually was coming out of the dentist's office, and an Edward Jones advisor in that area happened to see her and just went up to her and started having conversation with her. Long story short, she talked to him about me. He asked me to do lunch, tell me about the Edward Jones opportunity. Little did I know he was like one of the biggest recruiters in our firm.
Wow.
He's an advisor out in Roy City, which is another story in and of itself, probably the only black guy in Roy City.
Wow.
But he was like, hey, Edward Jones isn't really an opportunity until you go through the process. They're very selective on who they hire, who they have go through training, because the business part of it is they do pour a lot of investment as far as capital into your business.
You personally.
Yeah. So they train you. You go to St. Louis for training, or Tempe, Arizona to their home office. They set you up in an office. By the time that you've gone through all your different trainings and opened up an office, they put 6 figures into you. So they want to make sure they get the cream of the crop and somebody who's going to stay for a long time. And so with me, I was like, well, let me just look at the opportunity before, I really consider it. Let me go through the process. And I got halfway through the process and like, I think I'm trying to get a job with the FBI. Like everything you can think of, they dissected me from all the way back to I was 10 years old to now. Wow. Just to make sure, again, there's nothing that would come up later that would send red flags to clients. But then just the process in and of itself. So the way I started my business, I actually went out and knocked on doors, introduced myself to the community, say, hey, my name's Ed Dixon with Edward Jones. I have an office here in Frisco. If I have some good ideas when it comes to investing, is it okay if I share with you?
Wow.
So even before getting to that point, they have you do what's called a day in the life, where they actually have you go out and knock on doors and say, hey, I'm building a business in this area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How did you move to this area if you're not from here? What brought you to this area? Just basically seeing if you can strike up conversations with people.
Yeah.
So when I did that day in the life, you had to get 20 contacts, basically come back with 20 phone numbers.
Yeah.
I almost threw up on myself because I had never really done that. You know, most of the times I've done sales positions before, because this is still inherently, and anytime you're building a business, you're selling yourself.
Yeah.
But I had never went out and like cold called, knocked on doors and say, hey, this is who I am. And so it was nerve wracking, but everyone that I talked to, and that was another thing before I made the decision to get into Edward Jones, I called 3 or 4 different advisors who had been with the company for different spans of time.
Yeah.
So somebody who was freshly out 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
Somebody had been here a couple of years. Somebody had been here 10 plus years. And I was like, okay, either this is the greatest company ever or I'm joining a cult.
Right.
One or the other.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone was giving me the same presentation about, you know, the work-life balance, about you being able to do things outside of work, you being able to pick your clients eventually, all those things that, again, it wasn't the situation up front. Eventually it became that way. But I was just intrigued of being my own business owner, even though, again, I'm still under the umbrella of Edward Jones. All Edward Jones asks you to do is be legal, ethical, and profitable.
Yeah.
So as long as you're doing that, you don't have somebody calling you and saying, hey, what time are you coming into the office? What time are you leaving? How many calls have you made? Even though
it's your business.
Yeah, it's your business. And I'll talk about this more. You have people that'll hold you accountable.
Yeah.
But it's on you to go out there and grind and bring the business in.
And do it. So I do want to ask this question, Ed, because I think a lot of people are unclear about it. I just had somebody say to me, actually, I think did they say your name? They did. They said, I'm gonna call Eddie because I want to get a budget. And I was like, I don't know if that's what he does, because I think that sometimes people think financial planner is somebody who's going to tell me what to do with my dollars that I have in terms of how I'm spending it every day. So can you give us some, like, what does a financial planner do and who needs one?
So I believe everybody needs one. It's like saying who needs a primary care physician. Okay. I think we all need it in some shape or form. And when you can go on WebMD and just look at different symptoms you're having and diagnose yourself, but is that truly what you need if you're sick? So I think the same thing with financial advising. I think what I do specifically, I mean, I've done that where I've helped people get their budget together to prepare them to help focus on their long-term goals. But that's what I really focus on, complete human wealth-centered management. So helping them with planning for retirement, helping them planning for the unexpected, whether it's life insurance or long-term care, helping them plan their estate so they can pass their assets on in the most tax-efficient way possible to their heirs. So it's really helping them when it comes not only to picking their investments, obviously that's the core of what I do, but more importantly, putting a plan together for what those investments are going to do. You know, you can have the greatest investments in the world, but if you don't have a plan, you really don't know what those investments are going to do by the time you get to retirement age. So we really put a plan together to say, okay, what do you want to do in retirement? What does retirement look like for you? What do you want to spend your time? Who are you spending your time with? I actually tell my clients when they come in for the first time to close their eyes. And if it's 3:00 on a Tuesday afternoon, I ask them, what are you doing for fun? Who are you spending your time with? And where do you picture yourself living? That way I can get an idea of what retirement looks like for them. Because for some people that might be, hey, I just want to see my kids and my grandkids. I want to live a very low-key life. And then I have some clients that say, hey, I want to travel the world. I want to live in Europe and come back here every 3 months to see the kids and grandkids. So it's a different type of plan that we got to put together.
So you need to get to figure it out.
I'm actually glad he gave the second variation, because I think that was me when I first sat down. He was looking like, this dude's crazy.
I'm like, people dream about picking up their grandkids from school.
Right. But
some people do. Yeah.
But I sit down with Ed, and I like to sit down like every 6 months, right? Because stuff changes in our life and in our business. But you said it before. I always ask him, like, the wealthiest people that you sit down with, or the wealthiest clients, like, what do they do? What are they? How are they moving stuff around, or what are they doing for generational wealth and stuff like that? So, I want to talk about, we can talk about that, but I want to go back a little bit.
Yeah, to what it looked like starting out.
Yeah, starting out. Because that's when, like right now you're grinding, right? You're working, but like door knocking, that's a grind, right?
Yeah.
I remember
that's a different grind. Yeah.
Door knocking, trying to ask people about selling their house and stuff like that. Like when you were doing that, because I'm sure you weren't like just super successful at it, right? But when it wasn't working, or when you had to pivot and go to another lead, getting leads and stuff like that, like what did that look like, and how did you keep the same mindset to keep moving forward, or this career is not for me?
Well, I think with any, especially as a business owner, but any career that you're going to, that you're saying, okay, this is it, I'm not switching again, I'm not going back to school, I'm not changing my outlook on what I want to do, you have to go into it saying, I don't have a plan B.
Yeah.
I think if I would have went into Jones saying, okay, if this doesn't work out, then I'll try this.
Yeah.
Then I wouldn't have had the dedication to knock on doors or to go meet people and say, hey, here, this is what I do.
Good stuff.
So I think the biggest thing was like, okay, there's no plan B. This is going to work, hella high water.
Yeah.
And I knew that was the case when, and I've shared this with you before, because I know you talked about Ubering when you first started out.
Sure.
My wife had just had Caleb, our middle child. And so she's a nurse, so she could always pick up shifts when, to support us financially. Mm-hmm. But because of the fact that she just had the son,
baby,
she couldn't go work more. I mean, she could, and my wife, she would have, but I didn't want to put that onus on her. So my first year was kind of rough when it came to knocking on doors. It wasn't my forte. I'm pretty introverted. I can be extroverted when I'm around people I'm comfortable with. Yeah. But when I'm just around strangers, I'm pretty much kind of keep to myself.
I think that's why you and Corey click, because y'all both are similar.
I'm the guy in the back of the club on the wall. I'm not the guy in the middle trying to, dance and all that.
Look, you a sharp dresser. I bet you was in the club then.
I was at the club in the back of the club watching everybody else.
I can see that too. I can see that.
So even in my first year, my first 6 months were rough, and I was like, I can't stop. I got to keep going, but I also have to be a provider for my family. Yeah. And so I actually worked Walmart overnight for probably about 6 months. So I started door knocking probably in May, June, which I'll get into is a whole nother story. Door knocking in Texas in the middle of summer with a suit on.
I had on my shorts. Like I could get away with that as real.
I think come maybe December or January after door knocking for about 5 or 6 months and not getting the initial success I was hoping for, I still wanted to be able to provide for my family. So I worked overnight at Walmart stocking shelves.
Wow.
Like literally pry to the side and say, you know what, I'm gonna go door knock from 8 o'clock in the morning to about 10:30, come home, take a nap, eat lunch, go back out again from about 2 to about 7:30. The good thing is summertime, it's still light out.
Yeah.
Come home, take a nap, eat a little bit of dinner, go overnight from 11 to 7, working at Walmart, stocking shelves. Come right back out and do it again. Yeah. Great thing is I had the support of my wife where she was able to take care of the kids during that time. She worked nights. So even though when she went back to work, it was never an issue where we had to find like care for the kids.
Just figured it out.
Just kind of, okay, I'm here at night, you here in the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was determined to say, I'm going to make this work. I saw the success of the people who had gone this road, because that's the thing that no one ever sugarcoated it for me.
Yeah, they told you what they had to do.
You're going to work the hardest you ever worked for the first 2 or 3 years of your life trying to build your business and feel severely underpaid for the amount of work that you're doing, which I can definitely, looking back now, say that was the case. Yeah. And then after that, once you build your business and you have referrals and you have clients, then not saying you're not going to work, but you're not going to have to work as hard.
It's not going to be that same sweat equity that it was.
And it was definitely sweat equity. Like I said,
literally.
Door knocking, I wanted to be professional. I didn't want to be mistaken for a lawn guy or a roofer.
Weed guy.
Yeah. I literally was out there in a suit and tie. I would change 2 or 3 times a day. I would always wear a white shirt, because if you wear a blue shirt or a dark shirt, all the sweat's going to show.
Yeah.
And I would just go up and down the street. I didn't want to look like a salesman, so I didn't have anything in my hand. I literally had like a prospecting log in my inner pocket, but literally just walking up and down doors of Frisco and just knocking on doors and introducing myself.
So that's dope. So I have to tell you thank you though, because, and I think we've shared it to you, but I don't know if we've shared it to the magnitude, because when around the time that we came to Ed, and y'all have heard me and Corey like boast about our life group, right? Ed is a part of our life group. And I remember that when we came to life group, that was in a season where there were a lot of unknowns in our life. Like we were looking to build. I'm trying to figure out, am I going to teach? Am I going to do this? Financially, we were strapped. And I remember Corey being like, I'm not trying to go sit on the couch and tell everybody like how broke I am, right? How busted my life is. And as we're building, he was Ubering, building his business. Because we're like, we might as well, like, we thought that was the coldest little come up in the world. Like, wait, hold on, we can take our car. Like, and then you just go to the airport 4 times and then you got some clients. But I want to say, in one of y'all's earliest conversations, he was doing it for us, but there, I think, we weren't like bragging that he was Ubering, right? There was a little bit of, I don't know if embarrassment is the word, but a little bit of, you know, we didn't make announcements. I think my mama might have been the only one that knew. And you shared at the time, I don't know if you had just stopped working at Walmart, but you shared, I think, just in the life group, like, look, I did what I had to do, like when we were building. And I think that gave you some freedom. Yeah. And I would really think that's when you all had a bond, because you shared so openly. And that's what I wanted to have you on here, because I know that we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, but in particular men who are building, like, and not to say ladies, okay, don't send me no hate mail. I know that we got it. We doing it, right? I'm doing it too with you. But I do recognize that there is a different level, or at least it feels like there's a different level of responsibility when it's a man, right? And I think that sometimes people feel like it shouldn't be this hard because everyone only shows their big Frisco office now, and they don't share the part about doing overnights with funky shirts and you know, all that stuff. So I appreciate I know your transparency set some things free in my husband, and I'm hoping that y'all's transparency on this podcast will set some things free for the other men entrepreneurs who are, you know, thinking that if I gotta go stock boxes at Walmart, do I need to quit my photography business?
Yeah, so I think I like that you shared that you just you didn't have a plan B, right? Because I remember the day that I decided to turn Uber into just a business for me. I was Ubering. I might have been making, I don't know what, $700-800 a week or something like that. Because I just got smart.
And we thought we was balling. Like we was balling. Well, not balling, but we was like, we'll never be broke again. Right, it was just easy
money. But what happened? It was two things that happened. What happened was I realized that getting up earlier, I would just get the airport runs, and they paid the most. You know, you go and do 3 airport runs and make $200 real quick, right? And it was the day that I drove one of the owners of DoorDash. I happened to be picking them up from the airport. They had an office down here somewhere, and I had never heard of DoorDash. He's explaining it to me and all of that kind of stuff. And I said, I'm talking these conversations and not just conversations, right? I started collecting business cards, and by the time I finished, I had 2 hands of business cards like this of just relationships, investors, just whatever.
You've even bought deals from some people that you drove at that time. I bought
houses from people. Like it was amazing for, you know.
I wish I would have known you back then, because I think I would have did Uber instead of Walmart. That sounds like a better hustle to me.
It was real.
It was a better hustle.
And just the relationships that I made, and I didn't do it that long. What was it, 6 months? Maybe 6 months.
Yeah, if that. And I mean, and then there was even a point where you had stopped for a while, but then things weren't clicking, and you went. We went right back up. Went back to the lap. Like, what we need to update your registration.
I sure did. But no, I just like that you looked at it that way. Because a lot of people, they do have a plan B or C.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And there's a difference between doing something. I think Lisa Nichols say this, like she had to fund her dream. Yeah. Right. So there's a difference between funding your dream, which is what y'all were doing, than having a plan B because I'm deciding this isn't gonna work.
Yeah. All right. So I just wanted to make sure we got that part of his story out. Let's talk about life now. What is because I'm sure you're meeting all kind of people from different variations of life. Like what are some things you learned, or some not specific investments, but just things that you learned about people trying to create wealth and leave legacy and do have something, I guess, when they get older for retirement?
So I think the biggest thing is, like I said, to have a plan. I think growing up in the neighborhoods I grew up in and my family, I didn't come from wealth, and so it's never really taught unfortunately in the Black community in general. You know, I'm not generalizing that everybody didn't have a mom and dad that ever taught them, but you know, my parents divorced when I was 10 years old. Even though my parents were doing okay financially, once they divorced and I didn't have a relationship with my dad, I didn't have someone to teach me about the ins and outs of money. So that's something I had to kind of self-teach myself. But I think the key is to have a plan, because otherwise and again, I see this again with a lot of families. You don't really know about wealth until it's dropped in your lap.
Yeah. And then you blow it.
Your great aunt leave you some money, your grandpa leave you some money. And I've seen that even with some of the clients that I've had, that they accumulate this wealth because it was just dropped in their lap and they didn't have a plan on what they were going to do with it. And then I've seen it as bad as 6 months to a year later, it's all gone.
Yeah,
and I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
You know, I've had one client that went through almost 7 figures because, again, they didn't really have a plan. And even though I became their advisor through their grandfather, who was one of my clients, they didn't really heed the advice. And so they were just thinking, oh, it's going to be here forever. And so I think that have a plan, not only for you, but start to have that conversation with your kids or people that you care about. So when you're around wealth, like you talked about before, we've had this conversation, you breed from what you're around. And so when you're around people who have done this, who have generational wealth, you know, they've accumulated assets from their parents. They're planning on leaving assets, not only just for their kids. Now they're starting to think about their grandkids and great grandkids, and not just the finances of, hey, I'm going to leave you X amount of money, but this is how you develop a relationship with the advisor. This is how you invest. This is how you pick stocks. This is how you pick mutual funds. So giving them all the ins and outs, and then I help them put that plan together to say, okay, this is how we're going to invest over the long term. This is what we expect the return to look like. This is what we expect you to have by the time you retire, and then having a plan for what retirement is going to look like. Because you can have the greatest plan as far as saving, but if you go into retirement and you have, I'm just throwing a number out there, $10 million, that sounds like a lot of money. But if you have an extravagant lifestyle, next thing you know, again, you out here living the video life, that $10 million can go.
It go quick. You can rent a yacht for $1 million. like rent, not buy. You can rent. Right. So Ed, before, I know our time is getting close to an end, but before we go out, I just, you know, you've hit on so many things. I'm thinking for financial literacy for kids. Because a lot of us, like I always say, like my parents were savers, but they didn't necessarily teach me how to save. Or I think a lot of times we do things and it's easy not to bring our kids into it and just do because that's the way we were. So what advice would you give to parents to build that financial literacy inside of their homes? Like, we know they need a financial planner, they need to seek out some things, but what are some things that we can start doing with our kids early on to condition them so that they have this sort of mindset?
I think the first key is just to be transparent with your kids. I know, like I said, growing up in my household, even though I knew my parents were doing okay financially before they got divorced, it was nothing that we ever talked about. We never talked about a budget. We never talked about saving, investing. That's one of the biggest things. Tell them the difference or show them the difference of saving versus investing. That's one of the things, again, prevalent in our community that we come from. We do a really good job of saving or hoarding, I call it, but we don't do a good job of investing. Not only just our time, but our talent and our resources and others to bring others along the journey to make sure everybody can be successful. But I think the best advice is, first of all, just sit down with your kids and say, okay, this is what bills look like. This is what investing looks like. This is how you should save. So with our kids, to give you an example, every time that they get allowance, they know, okay, 10% we got to save, or actually 10% we got to tithe. They know that off top. 10% we have to save, and then 10% we have to give. Or if you don't give it right then and there, put it into a pile of, hey, this is at some point in time, somebody's going to have a need that God's
I like the gift pal. I didn't think of the gift pal. So we tell them, you get to live off of 70%. Now we try and practice of living off of less than that, but teaching them to say, hey, tithe 10%, save 10%, give 10%. So now they have the discipline to say, okay, I'm always just going to live off the 70%. And I think that's something that was never taught to me growing up. It was like, okay, you got 100%. You got 100% to spend. Or even worse, you got 110% to spend, because once you get to college and get credit cards, now you got even access to more money. So just starting off with the basics of investing, of saving, of giving, of living off less than what you're getting as far as your income is concerned. And then you can get into more specifics as far as the investing portion is concerned.
I actually, two things I picked up there. One was the savings versus investing. That is an Eagle Talk episode. I'm going to have Glennis put that down.
Yeah, so we can say.
The second one was, you talked about the kids, but also the parents. I think it's important for the parents to learn these things, how important it is to do it for the kids also. Kind of like the what do we have? for the kids?
The 529s,
Right.
Or we have
the IRAs.
The IRAs,
like
yeah.
I didn't know that you can do that
for kids.
You know, at a certain age for kids.
Yeah.
And you know, like,
and
so,
bringing them in, letting them see their accounts, letting them see it grow, and explain to them this is not for Robux.
Exactly. You know, it's later down the line, but the disciplines and instilling in them early. I just, if I wasn't educated and brought that information to you and you was like, yeah, this is true, you can do it this way, and so the parents just don't know a lot of times.
And show them, like you said, show them the long-term trajectory of, hey, you know, play now or play later.
Yeah.
Like if you save now, yeah, you could still have a little bit of fun, you know, especially if your kid is successful, you know, again, living off that 70%.
Yeah.
But if you say, hey, if you put this 10% for the next 30 years
right.
and let that compound with interest, show them what that'll look like. And that'll open up their eyes and say, okay, maybe I can have the discipline to say, I don't need another pair of shoes, or I don't need, you know, whatever their thing is, because I know I'm saving for the future. I mean, we showed that Roth example where if you're just funding a Roth for 30 years, starting, you know, in your early 20s, easily have 7 figures. And that's just a Roth. That's just $50,000 or $6,000 a year. So obviously if they do more than that, then they're going to have more. So I think just the basics of just showing them what it's going to look like long-term, get them bought in.
And here's my last question before we wrap is, you know, there is a lot of shame around finances. Right. I know that for a long time, Corey and I were kind of like, we don't want to talk to each other about it. Right. About what we have, because we know that we weren't acting right, we weren't doing right. And but the trick in that is that the ignorance, like being willfully ignorant, not looking for an answer. And I'm not saying ignorant in a negative connotation, but just you don't know. So you can't fix what you don't know is broken. So what would you say to the person that is hesitant to reach out to a financial advisor, or they have shame around what they didn't know, what they weren't taught, and they're just continuing that cycle? Like, what would you say to them?
I guess this is basic advice of get over that fear, because it's just like I tell clients when I meet with them for the first time in the medical field, given a prescription without a diagnosis is called malpractice. The same thing in my industry. If I say, hey, here's a good investment without knowing where you're coming from and where you're trying to go, then it's financial malpractice. So again, it's the same thing. If you're having symptoms in your body, you're not going to say, you know, I'm too ashamed to go to the doctor. I'm just going to hopefully deal with whatever this is. And then eventually it just comes worse and you have to go to the doctor. So you want to be proactive before it becomes radioactive. And so I think the same thing is just say, you know what, all of us come from different backgrounds, different circumstances. I'm a financial advisor. And again, full transparency. And when we were in Michigan, like we were the brokest of the broke. And so, you know, for me to give advice to somebody now just shows that you don't have to start from money.
You don't have to stay there either.
You don't have to stay at that point, but you have to take the steps to say, okay, I'm going to put a plan together to get out of debt, to budget better, to save better. And so, just start and, you know, again, work with a trusted financial advisor that won't make you feel shameful of where you come from, who understands, who he or she understands what you've been through and can relate to your story.
Well, we appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Now, if the people would like to call our trusted financial advisor, how can they reach out to you?
They can reach me. They can go on edwardjones.com. Just search for Ed Dixon. I give you my number. I can put it in the comments, something like that, my email.
All right, y'all. Well, I didn't learn something.
I learn all the time from Ed.
I learn all the time from Ed too. So thank you so much for being here. And that is our Eagle Talk episode for today. Don't know yet what we're talking about next week, but it's gonna be dope. So you should be back here, and we just can't wait to see you. See y'all soon.
See y'all.
Bye.